Mohammad Anwar, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
Same here, Mahan. I'm excited to be here.
Can't wait to talk about love as a change strategy, Mohammed. But before we get started talking about your book, would love to know a little bit more about you, your
Mhm.
upbringing, and how
Mhm.
it helped contribute to who you've become.
I was born in Saudi Arabia to Indian parents, and I was raised there till I was 14. And then I had an opportunity to go to India for a year of schooling before I was shipped off to the United States to go to a boarding school, a Catholic boarding school in Kansas. So culture shock for me, Saudi Arabia to India, then to Kansas. And then after I finished my high school, I moved to Houston. I've lived here since 2000, so about 25 plus years in Houston now. That's more than half my life. And went to University of Houston, got my computer science degree and so forth. So my upbringing, having lived internationally, having been born and raised as an expat in the Middle East, because my parents are non-immigrant workers, living in Saudi Arabia, going to India, going to Kansas, then Houston. I've got to experience many different cultures, many different people from all different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different languages, different food. And I've always appreciated the human connection despite our differences. So I think that has one aspect to it. But I will also tell you, my upbringing of living in Saudi Arabia where my father was working, he would come home being frustrated from the workplace. He would come home and he would share how he felt dehumanized every day at the workplace for various reasons. Number one, because it was a bunch of expats working in the Middle East, to somebody else taking credit for his work, to the way the promotions work, the pay scales work. You get paid different salaries based on your different nationalities for the same role. So that in itself is dehumanizing. And as a kid, I saw a lot of that, I guess, the experiences that my father had. And so as I grew up and I started my own business, I believe that's how you ran business. You should be a hard ass. You have to create structure and processes where you keep people in their place. You make them do what they're supposed to do, and you make it a competitive environment. You make them fight against each other to get the best out of all of them. I did that for my own business and I had a lot of success in the beginning. But then years into the business, I was barely a 30-year-old because I started my business at 20 and I was living the American dream. And eventually, because I had become power drunk, because I had become selfish and greedy, I was on the verge of bankruptcy. My company was about to shut down. And in a deep moment of introspection, I had to realize that this is actually all my fault. My selfish attitude, my dictator style of leadership almost destroyed the business. And when I was going through this near bankruptcy, I had to go through layoffs. I had to lay off one third of my workforce. I had never done that. I ended up doing that in a dehumanizing way as well. And eventually, when I was losing hope and I had no idea how I'm going to keep the company from shutting down, I witnessed a miraculous comeback victory at an American football game from my alma mater at the University of Houston. And that comeback victory inspired me so much that I was curious how the coach had taken this team to barely being able to win that night to all of a sudden winning. And how did they do it with that resiliency and comeback? Because I started to envision my own comeback in my business. And it's what he said that changed the course of my life. The coach attributed love to how that team was able to come back and win that night. And he said it wasn't the love you dog, love you bro kind of love, but it was a genuine love where the players loved one another, where they went on the field not to fight for themselves, but fight for their teammates. And that's how you build championship level teams and high performing teams. So in that moment, number one, I was shocked. Number two, I was inspired. And I realized that I did not love my team and I need to go on a journey to change my behaviors to that of loving others and create a culture of love. And that helped our company go from barely surviving to thriving. So I know your question was about how my childhood shaped me who I am today, but I would say even though I was in my 30s, I don't think I really grew up till that day because that day taught me a life lesson about the importance of loving others and loving humans beside you, because ultimately we are better together.
It's a beautiful origin story, Mohammed, filled with self reflection and filled with the kind of humility that we need a lot more of in leadership, recognizing how little many of us and many leaders have progressed. When you look at the Gallup data of employee engagement and thriving all across the globe, including here in the States, the data is not much better. So
Yeah,
we are failing as leaders. Let me push back on one element before we
sure.
go more into love. Why would the audience say that this makes sense and this is the way to go versus there are very successful examples, including the richest man in the world, who says, you know what, you should be working 70, 80 hours a week. Love
Mhm.
doesn't matter. It's just performance. If you perform, even when I'm screaming at you and everything else, you can hang around, otherwise not. And he has started many very successful organizations. So why not that? Why love?
Yeah, there are organizations that are using fear as a strategy to get outcomes and achieve their business goals and outcomes. But there are very few of them that probably can sustain that type of a culture for longevity, right? So if you look at a lot of the Fortune 500 companies that are on the market today, if you just compare it to 60, 70 years ago, less than 25, 30 of those companies are still on the S&P 500, right? What does that mean? All these organizations that at one point were Fortune 500 companies don't survive forever in the Fortune 500 state. So they will eventually fall behind if they don't adapt, if they don't embrace the humanity, if they don't change with times. So while today's examples might be some of these companies that you can look at how successful they are, I would be curious to see how long have they been successful like this and how much longer can they sustain this? Because if you look at history, the companies that were once in the Fortune 500, 70% of them have dropped from the Fortune 500. So I don't know that I can attribute this to be a long term strategy. And I don't know that it is sustainable because what I do know as human beings, we are social animals who have our own limitations and who have our own human conditions that, whether we like it or not, show up with us to work. And today we might put up with bad culture, bad bosses for making money, just like my father had to, because he had to survive and pay for five children's food and education. That's why he moved from India to the Middle East to do what he needed to do, and he put up with it. But he was miserable in doing it, right? But I was grateful that his sacrifices got me where I am today. But it was not sustainable. He couldn't wait to retire. He just had to leave. And he was also quite quitting. He probably didn't bring his full self. He probably didn't bring the best possible innovative ideas. He created a lot of patents in his career, but then for the last 10, 15 years of his life, he was just like, I'm just going there for a paycheck. I'm not going to do the best work of my life. I'm not going to put the best possible work. I'm just going to try to get to retirement and coast. So if you look at your Gallup survey, that's what that's indicating is that the engagement isn't there. So people are just showing up for a paycheck. They're not doing the best work of their lives. And so that's my answer. Today it looks glamorous. I'd say the jury is out. Let's look at it 10, 20 years from now.
A couple of perspectives on that. It also has to do with us reflecting on our humanity and our values. I would say it could be, Mohammed, that does produce better results.
Sure.
However, a question that I would ask myself, and I think all of us need to ask ourselves, is what do we consider to be positive results? And do we
Mhm.
want to be associated with achieving results that way? Sometimes we only measure the dollars that are made. If
Mhm.
that is the only measure in the world and in life, maybe not having that love is the right way to go. I don't know. but maybe it is.
Sure.
However, I know most of my audience and vast majority of leaders I interact with have values that go beyond just those dollar signs at the end of the day. They want to make a positive difference in their communities, in the lives of the
Mhm.
people they interact with. Therefore, that love becomes even more important. So you connect love as a change strategy. Before
Mhm.
we talk about some of the principles that you cover in your book, want to get your thoughts and perspectives on how this approach differs
Mhm.
from what we've gotten to know about change in teams and organizations.
So my experience has been working with several organizations is that number one, the decisions to create change or change decisions or change strategy is most of the time built or instituted by leaders from not a people first approach, but probably a tech first approach or a process first approach. And so they'll make a decision, say, we're going to roll out this technology. And then they'll hand it to change management folks and say, hey, now go manage this change and make the people come along. And when people don't come along, they blame change management. They don't ever blame their strategy for being poor. And so our philosophy is that it's not just about managing change, it's about leading change with love, is with a people first approach to change, meaning now you think of people first before you decide your technology, before you decide your structure and process. It's not the other way around. So that's the fundamental difference. And today's world, the corporate workplace and the workplace in general, prescribe to change management philosophies to make their change effective. But the reality is, you can have a crappy change strategy and the best change management and still not be effective. So we want leaders to start thinking about change from a people first approach and then effectively lead that change with not a change management process, but change principles to help change people's behaviors. Because when you really think about it, you can create a tech change, AI transformation, digital transformation, and M&A and org structure. Ultimately, the people are having to adapt to these changes. So what we're talking about is changing people's behaviors, how they act, how they use a tool, how they behave. And you can't just mandate changing people's behaviors by going through a checklist. Oh, here's the process. Here's my change management process. I'll go through step 1 through 10. I check the box. I don't know why people are not changing. It's because process is brittle. It cannot survive stress. It cannot survive pressure. And the minute there's a change to change, processes break. So today's predominant change management frameworks are very process heavy and they do not work for humans. In fact, they have not worked the last 3, 4 decades because 78% of change initiatives fail. And why is that? Because not because change management was bad. Number one, it was because our change strategy in itself was a failed strategy. Number two is you're trying to lead people to change through process, and humans don't change through process. You need to change their mindsets, their beliefs to change their behaviors. And so you have to understand how to lead people through change so they become more change ready and adaptive to change. So our framework, unlike all the other frameworks, is a people first approach, understanding the human conditions of why humans resist change and how can you create environments where people are more change ready so that when change is put upon them, number one, they are aligned to it because it's people first, but secondly, they're ready to adapt. And that's what our whole framework and love as a change strategy prescribes to.
I appreciate that. And just as an aside, John Cotter, who
Mhm.
has been associated with change since he did the research at Harvard back in the late 1970s, has written lots of books, including his most recent that he published a couple of years ago on change, focuses on the fact that he had gotten it wrong before. And that
Mm,
when people talk about the burning platform, the people in the organization get terrified, and we as humans clam up when we are
yeah.
terrified. We don't want to embrace change. So he talks a lot about the human element as well, which I credit Professor Cotter for that. In that, one of the beautiful things is when people change their own minds,
Mm.
what works and what doesn't work. So, with that said, now I want to understand this approach a little bit better. For example, a couple of organizations that I'm working with, one an educational institution, a lot of the professors and others are very hesitant about embracing AI for a whole host of reasons. They
Mhm.
see it as a cheating tool for the students. And
Mhm.
the same thing in a series of organizations that I've worked with and interact with, where the
Mhm.
executives, the CEOs want people to see the AI tools more as assistants and augmenting them rather than fearing being replaced by these things that all of a sudden come up with answers. So, if you were advising
Mhm.
those leaders on a people first approach rather than a process first approach to embracing AI, how would you approach that, Mohammed?
So the first step is to understand the human psychology when it comes to AI. So the best analogy I give is that AI is such a novel technology. It is unlike any other technology that has come before its time, that there's a lot of unknown about the unknown. And the fear of the unknown is what is causing us to resist AI. And by that, I have to give you an example. I get in my car every day and I drive to wherever I need to go. Sometimes I drive to the airport. I am very comfortable driving my car to the airport, even though the likelihood is I will have 1 in a 5,000 chance of me getting into an accident. Versus when I get onto the plane, I'm actually very fearful. I'm very nervous getting onto the plane. And the likelihood of me having a plane accident is far less than the drive over to the airport. And that's because I know the mechanics of my car. I know the risks associated with the car. I know how to mitigate those risks. I know I need to put my seatbelt on. I know I need to follow the speed limit. I know I need to make sure my tires have the right pressure. And so we are conditioned to understand the risks and mitigate it. So I'm willing to take those risks and I don't have fear of driving my car every day, even though I can have a higher chance of meeting an accident. Versus when I get on the plane, I don't understand the mechanics of the plane. I don't know how planes fly. I don't know who the hell is flying it. I don't understand what the hell is happening in the flight controls, air tower controls. I don't know any of this stuff. So I'm very nervous. And sometimes I choose not to fly. I'd rather drive. Similarly with AI, when people are fearful of AI, it's the same concept. It is so new. It is such an unknown thing for people that when they don't understand the mechanics of AI, they don't appreciate how AI works, how it is trained, what does it do, how does it function. And we have that fear of the unknown, we resist this technology. And so the key to getting people to embrace AI is in the fact that starting with leaders, we need to get to work, set our egos aside, knowing that my 30 years of experience don't mean anything with AI. I have to become a novice, I have to become a beginner, and I have to learn and understand the mechanics of AI. And when you begin to understand the mechanics of AI, your fear level drops because the amygdala part of your brain is what is causing fight, flight, or freeze or freezing. Because I don't want to use AI because I don't know enough about AI. And I just see news that the self-driving car had an accident and that I read this MIT research that people are becoming dumber because they're using AI. So we have algorithmic aversion and we start to see this news of negative news and we overinflate what it really is. But the truth is, a self-driving car can reduce accidents by 94%, stated by the Department of Transportation. But we get hung up on the news that a Tesla self-autonomous car had an accident. So again, it's the fear of unknown. So if we can go into organizations, which is what we do, we have a humane first transformation approach, which is spelled HUMAIN, which is humane first. How do you bring AI in transformation to organizations while keeping humans at the center of it. And the first step is to help people appreciate that they need to become a novice. All of us are beginners, and we're going to learn the basics of AI. Once we learn the basic mechanics of AI, then we'll appreciate how to use it, how to appreciate the mechanics of it. So my brain, instead of the amygdala, I started using my executive function, and now I'm creative, innovative, less fearful, ability to embrace AI, and I understand how to mitigate all the risks, mitigate the risks of hallucination, mitigate the risk of falling asleep on the wheel, mitigate the risk of data privacy, because now I understand the mechanics. And now we can start embracing it. But what also is happening in organizations are leaders, just like the agile transformation day and age, they told everybody to go agile, but they chose to be waterfall, right? So similarly, in today's day and age, these leaders are going around telling, we need to embrace AI. Don't be scared of AI, embrace it. But they themselves don't know the mechanics of AI. They themselves don't appreciate what it is. So they don't know how to lead an organization through this transformation. So we have a whole framework called the Humane First AI transformation approach, where it's a three-pronged strategy from a people, process, technology set. In the people standpoint, you need to elevate the human elements. Our humanity of relationships, critical thinking, communications, co-creation, innovation, even getting to conflict is something AI cannot touch right now. So how do we elevate those human elements and enhance our skills by unlearning old ways of working and relearn the new ways of working in AI? Second prong is evaluate and eliminate processes. Look at all your workflows and ask yourselves, why are we doing this in a 20-stage workflow? And if the answer is because we've always done it that way, it's time to eliminate and reimagine your workflows with AI. Third step, you automate and augment. So now you look at all of your mundane, monotonous tasks that have sucked the humanity out of our life because we're busy doing monotonous works and reports and emails and boring work that sucks out the humanity in us. Let's replace that with automation and augment the humans with AI. So this three-pronged strategy is the humane first approach to bring humanity back to the workplace with AI. I believe if instituted the right way, AI is not a human replacement strategy, but it is a strategy to bring humanity to the workplace.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it, in that many roles, the humanity was taken out of them, and people, in essence, were asked to be almost like robots following specific processes. Even if you look at many job descriptions, they are detailed to the point that it can be handed over to a robot, and a robot could do those jobs, and had taken the humanity, whether the brain, the emotions, out of it. This is an opportunity to put it back in. However, as you mentioned, one, it is engaging the humanity in that process. Another one is that leadership, more than anything else, is example. And as
Yes.
leaders show the example of the growth mindset, the willingness to learn, the willingness to embrace, whether it's a technology or otherwise, then that sets the right example for the team. So those are two outstanding ways to help initiate change in the organization. Now, with your 6 principles of change, you also start out, Mohammed, with embrace discomfort. Now, the reality is, most instances, we try to avoid it, whether in our personal lives. Most of us know we should eat better, exercise more, sleep more. We don't do it. So, how can we approach embrace discomfort in leading change in the organization?
So great question. I would start off with an analogy and then I'll bring it to perspective for us humans. So when you look at a herd of cows, when a storm is approaching them, they run away from the storm. And the storm ends up chasing those herd of cows and they end up staying in the storm longer than they should have. And then the herd of buffaloes, when they see a storm, they run into the storm and they're on the other side of the storm faster and drier pastures, right? So that's the analogy of embrace discomfort. But for humans, we are creatures of comfort. We don't like discomfort. But if we retrospectively look at all of our lives, every single one of us, And I ask, hey, when is the most growth that you've had in your lives from a retrospective standpoint? We will always point to hardships. We will point to tough times. We will point to struggles. And you will see that we have all grown, leveled up when we have been through discomfort. But when we futurecast our lives, we don't want that discomfort. We try to avoid discomfort at all costs. So once we just recognize, if I go talk to myself when I was 20 years old, when I was starting off my business, and I talk to that version of Muhammad and say, hey, this is what I'm doing 23 years later. I wrote 2 books on love. My 20-year version will be like, what's wrong? Who the hell are you? Right. So nobody knows what growth will look like in my future. Nobody. We can have a goal, but what it really ends up being is probably never what your goal to start off with was. I never started off my business thinking I'm going to speak about love, write books on love, talk about change, talk about all of the things that I'm doing with you on the podcast. That was never my goal. But as I went through hardships, as I went through near bankruptcy, as I went through the challenges of life, work, I grew and I learned and I unlearned and I relearned. And I am here where I am today, where I have grown, but I never anticipated this growth. So when you look to the future, when you look to change and it creates discomfort, the idea is run towards discomfort because on the other side of that is growth. What does that growth look like? I may not know today. But if you can find opportunities to run towards discomfort, of course, in productive manners, right? Then you are likely going to grow. And that growth, I don't know what that would look like, but you're destined for growth if you can embrace discomfort, because that is what helps people level up.
That's a great way for us to look at it for ourselves or even organizational strategy as well, where in many instances, much of strategy is meant to protect rather than embrace discomfort toward the change that is required for the organization. You also mentioned prioritize relationships, Mohammed. So I want to get your thoughts on when you talk about change and prioritize relationships with the introduction of AI agents, AI coworkers. How do you see relationships and trust playing a role in change and transformation?
So when it comes to change and transformation, change moves at the speed of trust. So prioritizing your relationships, which is getting to learn more about each other, like understanding what ticks you, what's your childhood, what helped you see the world the way you see the world, and practicing vulnerability with each other is what helps strengthen the relationships. So when we prioritize relationships, we're creating environments of trust so that we can lead change and move through change together in more effective manners. Now, as it relates to AI agents and or co-working with AI, I would say that we should be careful not to build a relationship with AI to the same extent as I would with another human being, because that could be risky. That could be a little dangerous, because then we might actually end up becoming less empathetic towards the real humans, because AI can feel, and data shows AI is far more empathetic. And even our doctors are. Sometimes we prefer medical advice through AI because it's far more empathetic than my own doctor is. And so the key is that we should look at AI as a co-intelligence partner or a second brain to help us do more critical thinking and come up with better innovation. But I wouldn't try to treat it as a sentient being where I start to build a relationship with AI. But then on the other hand, if AI agents can autonomously do more of the work that is monotonous, that frees me up. For example, I used to spend about 2.5 hours a day on email. Today, I have AI agents that read through my email, sort them in the appropriate folders, draft my responses for emails that I already need to know that I need to reply to. And I just have to go review the draft and hit submit. That's given me back 2 hours of my day. That's 2 hours of my day that I can now be more human with my coworkers and have one-on-ones and do coaching and mentoring and go out for lunch or go have breakfast together, go have coffee together. I would say leverage AI in a way that gives you back your humanity. Let you go do the things you need to do to have empathic conversations, to build relationships. So leverage AI agents in this capacity to make you more human so you can go spend and prioritize relationship with the other humans.
That's a great way for us to think about it. All that said, Mohammed, almost a third of Gen Z have ongoing relationships now with AI, chatbots, some getting emotionally engaged.
Mhm.
So it is a concern as we move forward with much more empathetic AI agents.
There's another way to look at it. Could it be that it's not AI's fault that the Gen Zs are having relations? It might be our humanity itself is broken, where we have forgotten to practice empathy. We have forgotten how to be loving of one another. We learn in kindergarten how to treat one another. And as we become adults, we have forgotten how to treat and behave with one another. So sometimes I don't blame humans for leaning on AI to find that empathy and connection, because us as humans, we are become busy to prioritize relationships. We have become too busy to be with other people. And so busyness has become our new comfort. So we avoid the discomfort of getting to know other humans, having relationships with them, breaking bread with them, having one-on-ones with them. And so I don't know that it's an AI problem or a humanity problem. Just food for thought.
What a beautiful way to put it, Mohammed. I had taken my 15-year-old for her physical before volleyball
Mm-hmm.
season.
Mm-hmm.
And she is fortunate to have a great doctor, unlike many of the other doctors I've been to, where the doctor was purely focused on her, asking her engaging questions, going back and forth. It was beautiful, and no AI or AI agent could replace that. As you mentioned, vast majority of medical visits I have been to, I would much prefer to deal with an AI because that AI shows more empathy. So I love the point that you just made. Maybe we as humans need to double up on our empathy now that we don't have to deal with all those other burdens. Going back to the doctor example, doctors at one point had to try to remember, write down, or with their laptops type what we were saying so they weren't focused on the
Mm-hmm.
humanity. Maybe with AI recording the notes, we can double up on the humanity. Now, in your 6 principles of change, I want to jump to the last one. Be effective. Love without results is sentiment. Love with execution is
Mm-hmm.
leadership.
So a lot of the ways that organizations roll out change is through process. And processes are built to drive efficiency, not necessarily effectiveness. You can be efficient, but never produce results. So when leading change, it's about not choosing what's efficient, but choosing a path to effectiveness. What does that mean? If I am rolling out a new policy, a changed policy, a changed org structure, or a changed technology, and the efficient thing might be to say, send an email to all your employees, super efficient, explain the why, give your case for change, give what's changing. And you're like, I did my job. I sent communication to all 10,000 people in my company, and we set up an LMS system for training. I'm done. I checked the box. I've done it. But doesn't mean people effectively adapt to change. So it's efficient, and we're creatures of efficiency, but efficiency doesn't always garner effectiveness. And in some cases of change, especially when you're asking humans to adapt, processes are not as effective. So what might be effective is actually doing town halls, which takes time, might be actually doing small team meetings, might be doing AMAs, might be actually going down to the floor level and trying to ask people, how do they feel? Why are they not liking it? What do they like about it? And that takes time. But this can garner effectiveness and adoption. So, what we're trying to say with this principle is don't try to just seek efficiency when leading change, seek effectiveness. And especially when it comes to humans, love is the way to effectively garner outcomes with humans. And so, choose your hard, which is embrace the discomfort and say, you know what? I may complain I don't have time for that and seek an efficiency based route, but not having time is an excuse. Not having time is my comfort saying, I don't want to do the work of going and talking to people. I don't want to do the discomfort of hosting town halls. I don't want to embrace the discomfort of having one on ones. So choose your heart because there is no easy path. And so that's the whole effectiveness, be effective principle.
Love takes time, takes emotional commitment, takes empathy, but it leads to more effective leadership of whether it's change strategy or the organization. Connecting back to the point about AI, in many respects, AI can make us drastically more efficient. Therefore, we have to see what parts of our lives we want to make more efficient and what parts we want to have more of that love and effectiveness. So, for example, I mentioned my daughter.
Mhm.
I don't want AI to watch her play volleyball. I have few moments with her as a teenager. I love watching her play volleyball. I don't need efficiency there. With
Yes.
emails, I do need efficiency with emails, right? So I've loved the conversation, Mohammed, and could go on for hours.
Same here.
Now, for the audience to find out more about you, follow your
Mhm.
work and your book, where would you send them to?
I would send them to loveasastrategy.com so they can get resources, books, place to purchase the books, and all of the above. If you're interested in seeking our consulting services for people first transformation, you can go to softway.com. It's spelled Softway.com.
I appreciate those resources, and we put links in the show notes for the audience as well. I love the quote from Leo Tolstoy: everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing themselves. What a
Right.
powerful way to remind us as leaders, as we want to lead change in our organizations. Maybe we should first start with ourselves. Thank you so much for this conversation, Mohammad Anwar.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. I enjoyed it.